It's about to get interesting, so subscribe and hit like so you don't miss the top content.
I still don't know how to tell this story without feeling like a complete idiot, but I guess it's time to put it out there. Maybe someone can tell me where I screwed up, or how I'm supposed to live with it. My name is Michael, I'm 28, and for the past few months, my life has turned into some kind of goddamn soap opera where I'm both the main character and the guy everyone hates in the comments. It all started when I fell in love with a girl I shouldn't have, and my best friend, Liam, did the same thing, only he turned out to be faster, and I turned out to be dumber than I thought. Here's how it went down. Liam and I had been friends since college. We met in freshman year, when we were both trying to survive economics lectures, which we hated with all our souls. He was the kind of guy who always knew what to say, with an easy smile, and the ability to pull you out of any moping mood. I'm more of a quiet guy, someone who thinks more than he talks, but I felt more alive around him. We had been through everything: failed exams, stupid parties, first jobs, even helped each other move when life threw us from one apartment to another. He was like a brother, and I never thought anything could break that. And then Rachel came along. I met her last summer at a mutual friend's barbecue. She was standing at the grill, laughing about how someone had almost burned the sausages, and I noticed the way her dark hair fell over her shoulders, and her eyes sparkled as she looked at the people around her. She wasn't the type to immediately catch my eye with her beauty, but there was something about her, a warmth, an ease, like she could make any day better just by being around. I approached her, made an awkward joke about the coals, and we got to talking. She turned out to be an interior designer, loved old movies, and could talk for hours about her trips to the small towns where she looked for inspiration. I felt like I was missing before I'd even finished my beer. Liam was there as well, but I didn't notice him paying attention to her that night. The three of us chatted, joking around, and I thought I'd caught the moment something between Rachel and I was starting to brew. I'm not one to jump right in, but I went home that night with her number in my phone and a goofy smile on my face. The next day I texted her, and we started texting nothing serious, just like messages, memes, a couple pictures of her latest project. I was going to ask her out for coffee, but I didn't have time. A week later, Liam casually mentioned that he'd gotten her number, too, and I felt something inside me twitch, but I brushed it off. He's my friend. I thought he wouldn't get in the way if he saw I was in on it. But I was wrong. Another month passed, and I started to notice that Liam was talking about her more and more, how she'd ridiculously described her failure to paint the wall, how they'd watch some old horror movie together that I couldn't stand. I asked him directly what was going on, and he shrugged, said they were just friends, that she was cool, and that was it. I believed it, because I wanted to believe it. And then, in the early fall, he came to my house, Saturday, on my shabby couch, and laid it out that he and Rachel were now together. He looked happy, but there was something else in his gaze, like he was expecting me to explode. I didn't explode. I nodded, clapped him on the shoulder, told him I was happy for him, even though everything inside me collapsed like an old house under a hammer blow. I don't know how to describe how I felt after that. I liked Rachel not just as a pretty girl, but as someone I could be myself with. But Liam was my friend, and I didn't want to come between them. I decided to back off, to drown out my feelings, to keep them at a distance. They started dating, and I watched it happen. The way he took her hand, the way she laughed at his jokes, the way they planned weekend trips. I was there for him, because Liam was still calling me to hang out with them, and I agreed, thinking I could get over it. But every time I looked at her, I realized I couldn't. It was like looking at something that could have been yours but now belonged to someone else. 3 months passed, and I started to break down. I saw her more often than I wanted to, sometimes at parties, then just randomly around town, and every time my heart took that stupid leap, I started noticing the little things. The way she'd roll her eyes when Liam got too caught up in his stories. The way she'd rub the bracelet on her wrist when she was nervous. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. And then that night happened. The three of us were at my house, just pizza, some movie in the background. Liam went out on the balcony to smoke, and Rachel and I stayed on the couch. I wasn't planning on doing anything, I swear, but she suddenly looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time, and I felt myself losing control. I leaned into her, and she didn't pull away. We kissed quickly, quietly, like it was a secret no one could know. But Liam was back, and even though he hadn't noticed, I realized I'd just crossed a line that could make everything fall apart. I stayed up all night after that, going over in my head what I had done. I'd betrayed my best friend, the person who'd been with me through everything, for a girl who wasn't even mine. But the worst part was that I didn't regret it as much as I should have. I wanted her, and that kiss just made it all the more real. Now I'm sitting here writing this, and I don't know what to do next. Liam and Rachel are still together, and he has no idea that I've become someone he would never see in me, a traitor. But I feel like this is just the beginning, and something tells me the consequences will be worse than I can imagine. It's been 2 weeks since that night on the couch, and I still couldn't look in the mirror without feeling like a piece of shit. That kiss with Rachel had lodged itself in my head like a splinter that couldn't be pulled out. I replayed it over and over, remembering how soft and warm her lips were, how her breath hitched for a second before she pulled away. I knew it was wrong, knew Liam didn't deserve this, but a part of me, the selfish, nasty part, didn't want to let go of that feeling. I tried to stay away from both of them, making excuses not to date, but it was like trying to run away from my own shadow. They were everywhere, in my thoughts, in my dreams, in every corner of the life I'd once considered my own.
Liam started to notice that something was wrong with me. He'd texted me more often than usual, asking why I was missing, offering to crash at my place with a beer, just like old times. I answered briefly, waved him off, said that I was busy at work, that I was just tired, but I could see he wasn't buying it completely. He knew me too well, and that only made me feel more guilty. He'd even walked in on me unannounced once, with a bag of chips and a stupid grin, and I'd spent the entire evening trying not to make eye contact with him while we played some old shooter game on my console. He was the same as he'd always been: fun, open, my best friend, and it was killing me, because I knew I didn't deserve it anymore. Rachel hadn't disappeared from my life either, though I prayed she'd stay away. She started texting me nothing explicit, just short messages, like how my day was going or that she'd seen a movie I'd like. I replied dryly, trying to keep my distance, but every time her name popped up on the screen, my heart took a leap and I hated myself for it. I thought that kiss was a mistake, an accident that we'd both just forget, but her messages spoke of something else. She hadn't mentioned that night directly, but there was something in her words, some softness, a hint that I couldn't ignore, and I was beginning to suspect that she couldn't let it go either. Things got worse when I ran into her by chance at a coffee shop near my work. I'd gone in at lunchtime to get takeout, and I saw her at a table by the window. She was sitting there with her laptop, headphones on, her bangs falling over her eyes. I could have walked away, pretended I hadn't noticed, but my feet carried me to her. She looked up, and I saw her face change, first surprise, then something warm that made me freeze. We sat her day there for half an hour, drinking coffee, talking about all sorts of nonsense or new project, how much I hated my current task at work, but underneath it all, there was tension, like a taut string ready to burst. I noticed the way her fingers twirled the spoon nervously, the way she would sometimes stop talking and stare at me a little longer than necessary, and I knew she was thinking about that night. I left that coffee shop with a feeling that things were only getting more complicated. I didn't want to be the guy who ruins other people's relationships, but every time I saw Rachel, my desire to be with her became stronger than my conscience. I started to see cracks in what was between her and Liam. She'd mentioned once that he worked too much, that they hardly ever saw each other, and I'd caught myself thinking that was my chance, a vile thought that I'd immediately tried to shake off, but it stuck like a bone in my throat, and I couldn't swallow it. And then there was the night that changed everything. Liam invited me to dinner at their house, nothing fancy, just him, Rachel, and me. Just like before, I didn't want to go, but it insisted, saying he missed me, that I'd been hiding for too long. I agreed, thinking I could hold my own. When I got there, everything seemed normal. Liam was making pasta, Rachel was chopping salad, and the three of us were sitting at the table, laughing about some nonsense. But then Liam went out to make a work call, leaving Rachel and I alone in the kitchen. I was washing plates. She was standing next to me, wiping them down with a towel, and the air between us had gotten so thick I could barely breathe. I turned to say something to her, and she suddenly stepped closer, somewhat too close. We didn't kiss, but I felt her breath on my neck, saw her eyes darken, and knew that another second and I wouldn't have stopped. Liam was back before anything happened, and the evening went on as if nothing had happened. But I saw the way Rachel avoided my gaze, the way her hands trembled slightly as she poured the wine. I went home feeling like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, and all it took was one step to fall. I stayed up all night thinking about what to do. I could tell Liam the truth, ruin everything right now and maybe save our friendship. Or I could go further, take Rachel away if that's what she really wanted, and lose him forever. But the worst part was that I was starting to suspect that she was playing with both of us, that her feelings for me were real, but she wasn't ready to let Liam go. And that thought gnawed at me the most, because I didn't know who I was now in this story, the victim, the traitor, or just a fool who backed himself into a corner. I spent the next couple days after the dinner in the kitchen like I was in a fog, like someone had turned off the light in my head and I was just pacing, not knowing where I was going to end up. That moment with Rachel, when we stood so close I could feel the warmth of her skin, wouldn't leave my mind. I replayed it over and over, asking myself what would have happened if Liam had come back so quickly, if I hadn't held back. But even worse, I started digging into the past, into the bits and pieces of my friendship with Liam and my attraction to Rachel that I hadn't noticed or wanted to see before. It was all starting to add up to a picture, and I didn't like it. Liam and I weren't just friends, we were a team. I remembered how he pulled me out of my depression after my first serious girlfriend had dumped me in sophomore year. I hadn't left my room for a week then, and he brought in pizza, turned on a stupid comedy, and Saturday with me until I started laughing, at least a little. Or how I helped him out when his dad lost his job and Liam had to quit his internship to work part-time at a bar. I'd given him half my savings back then so he wouldn't drop out of college. We always stuck by each other, and I thought it was unbreakable. But now I looked at him and saw only the man I was betraying, and the feeling burned me from the inside out. Rachel wasn't just some random girl, either. I remembered how, at the barbecue where we'd met, she told me about her family, how her parents had divorced when she was 12, and she still blamed herself for not being able to keep them together. It was the first time I saw in her not just laughter and lightness, but something deeper, some shadow she was hiding behind a smile. I'd thought then that I wanted to be the one to help her deal with it, but I hadn't even gotten started. Liam beat me to it. And I still don't know if he saw in her what I did, or if he just got caught up in her charm like everyone else. She was the kind of girl who attracted people without even trying, and I felt weak for not being able to resist. After that night in the kitchen, I tried to stay away, but Rachel wouldn't let me. She texted me the next day to a long message telling me that she needed to talk to me, that she was confused and didn't know how to be. I read it as I sat on my couch, feeling the urge to drop everything and run to her and the fear that doing so would completely destroy what was left of my friendship with Liam. I didn't respond right away, but a day later I agreed to meet her in the park, a neutral place where I hoped to keep my cool. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting on a bench in her gray coat, clutching a paper cup of coffee. She looked tired, shadows under her eyes, but still damn beautiful, and I hated myself for noticing it. We were walking through the park, and I listened to her try to explain her feelings. She said that she cared about Liam, that he was a good guy, but something between them wasn't the way it should be. She felt alone even around him, and it was killing her. And then she looked at me, and I saw in her eyes what I feared the most, that I wasn't just a friend to her, not just a mistake. It was like a blow to the head, because I realized that she wanted the same thing from me that I wanted from her, but the price was too high. We stopped at the pond, where the ducks floated lazily in the murky water, and I felt my patience wearing thin. I told her I couldn't take it anymore, that it wasn't fair to Liam or to us. But she just lowered her head, and I knew she wouldn't back down. The next day, I decided to talk to Liam. I wasn't going to tell him everything: the kiss, the kitchen, the park, but I wanted to understand where he was in the story. I called him in for a beer at the bar where we'd hung out a lot before, and Saturday across from him, watching him sip his IPA and talk about some project at work. He looked happy, but I noticed he barely mentioned Rachel, and that prickled me. I asked how they were doing, and he mewed and shrugged and said it was fine, but I could see he was hiding something. That's when I realized that it too felt their relationship was cracking at the seams. Even if it didn't know why, that should have stopped me, but instead it pushed me further. 2 days later, I met up with Rachel again, this time at her house. Liam was at work, and I knew it was a bad idea, but I went there as if I was being pulled by invisible strings. She opened the door, and I saw a determination in her eyes that wasn't there before. We sat in her living room, on the same couch where she usually sat with Liam, and I felt like an outsider, but that didn't stop me. We didn't hold back. It was more than a kiss, more than a moment of weakness. I left there an hour later, with her scent on my jacket and the feeling that I had just set my life on fire and was now watching it burn. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I realized it wouldn't stay a secret. Liam was too perceptive, and Rachel was too honest, even if she didn't want to be. I got home, lay on my bed, and stared at the ceiling, trying to figure out whether I was now the guy who stole a girl from his friend, or just an idiot who couldn't stop in time. But one thing I knew for sure: everything Liam and I had built over the years was on the brink of destruction, and I was the one holding the match that set it on fire. After that night at Rachel's, I knew it wouldn't stay a secret for long. I felt like a man who had thrown a grenade and was now waiting for it to explode, not knowing how many seconds he had left. I stayed up most of the night, lying on my bed, staring up at the dark ceiling, trying to figure out how I'd gotten to the point of betraying Liam to the person who was closest to me. But even in that chaos, I couldn't stop thinking about Rachel, the way her hands clung to me, the way she looked at me with such a mixture of guilt and desire that I didn't know where to get away from myself. I wanted her, and the feeling drowned out everything else, even the shame that should have stopped me. I woke up this morning to a text from Liam. He texted that he wanted to meet, that he needed to talk, and I knew right away that he knew something. My stomach twisted, but I replied that I'd be at our bar in an hour. I sat there, rubbing the bottle of beer until he walked in with a tired face, tight lips, and a look I'd never seen from him before. He sat down across from me, and I noticed his hands shaking slightly as he took his beer. I expected him to start yelling, accusing, maybe even hitting me, but he just stared, and that was the worst part. Then he spilled everything Rachel had confessed to him that morning, not about that night, but about the first kiss, about how she was confused, that she was drawn to me, and that she couldn't pretend that everything was okay with him anymore. I sat there as if I'd been nailed to a chair and listened to him tell me that she left him before dawn, leaving a note saying she needed time to sort herself out. He didn't know about that night at her house, and I didn't tell him, not because I wanted to hide it, but because I could see how hurt he was already. He asked me why I did it, why I hadn't told him sooner, and I didn't know what to say. I tried to explain that I didn't want to lose him, that things were out of control, but the words sounded hollow, even to myself. He stood up, threw the money on the table, and left without saying anything else, and I realized that our friendship had died right there in that bar, amid the smell of spilled beer and the hum of other people's voices. I didn't see Liam after that, but I heard from mutual acquaintances that he quit his job and went to stay with his parents in another state. He blocked me everywhere, and I didn't blame him for that. I would have done the same. Rachel called me the day after that meeting at the bar. She said she had rented a room at a friend's place, that she couldn't go back to Liam, and that she wanted to be with me if I was willing to give her a chance. I met her that same night, at a small cafe on the edge of town, and looked across the table at her, trying to figure out how I felt. She looked lost, with red eyes and disheveled bangs, but she still had that spark in her that had hooked me that first day. I wanted to hate her for what she'd done to Liam, to me, to all of us, but I couldn't. Instead, I took her hand, and we just sat there, silent, as dusk faded outside the window. We started dating, if you could call it that, but it wasn't what I'd imagined. I thought taking her away from Liam would be a victory, that I'd get what I wanted, but instead I felt empty. Every time she laughed or touched me, I remembered the three of us sitting on my couch, Liam patting me on the shoulder, us being the family I would never have again. Rachel tried to make it real, cooking me dinner, taking me on walks, showing me her sketches, but I could see that she was struggling with guilt. We didn't talk about Liam, but he was between us, like a ghost that couldn't be chased away. As the month passed, I began to notice that Rachel was growing distant. She wrote less often, stayed at her friend's house more often, and I could feel her slipping away. One night she came to me, Saturday, on the edge of my couch, and told me we needed to stop. She confessed that she couldn't forget how it had started, that every time she looked at me, she saw Liam and the pain we had caused him. I didn't argue, I knew she was right. We parted quietly, no screaming, no tears, just two people who realized they destroyed more than they could build. She left, leaving behind the smell of coffee and an emptiness I didn't know what to fill. Now I'm sitting here writing this and trying to figure out what I should do next. Liam is gone, and I don't know if I'll see him again, but I hope he finds a way to forgive me, at least in time. Rachel sent me a text last week, just a simple "I'm sorry," and I haven't responded because I don't know what to say. I lost them both, and it's my fault, but it's not all my fault. We all played our part in this mess. Liam, who didn't notice her slipping away, Rachel, who couldn't choose, and me, who didn't stop when I should have. I sit in my apartment, staring at the empty couch where it all started, and think that maybe this is the consequence I feared. Not the loud explosion, but the silence that is left after everything collapses. I don't know how to live with that, but I'm learning. Maybe one day I'll find a way to forgive myself, like Liam will hopefully forgive me. Or maybe this is just my new reality of living with what I've done and what I've lost. If anyone has any advice on how to get out of this shit, I'm all ears. For now, I'm just trying not to drown.